If God didn't have a purpose for us, we wouldn't be here. Mildred Honor is a former elementary school music teacher from Des Moines, Iowa. Having retired after 30 years of dedicated service, she has always supplemented her income by giving students piano lessons. In all her years as a music teacher, Mildred has found that children have differing levels of musical ability. Even though she has never had the pleasure of teaching a prodigy, she remembers some very talented youngsters. On one occasion, she remembers a student named Robbie. He was 11 years old, the child of a single mother who dropped him off for his very first lesson. As a matter of policy, she prefers students, especially boys, to begin at an earlier age. She candidly explained this to Robbie, but he pleaded to be accepted because it had always been his mother's dream to hear him play the piano, so she accepted him. Well, Robbie began his piano lessons and didn't show much potential. In fact, Mildred honestly confesses that she felt it was a hopeless endeavor. As much as Robbie tried, he lacked the sense of tone and basic rhythm needed to excel. But as a resolute student, he dutifully reviewed his scales and some elementary pieces that Mildred required all her students to learn. The progress was slow and not very encouraging. Nevertheless, at the end of each weekly lesson, Robbie would always say, "My mom's going to hear me play someday." But Mildred concedes that she regarded that as wishful thinking. The eager young student just did not have the inborn ability. Funnily enough, Robbie's mother would merely drop him off or wait, but never come in, even though she would cheerfully smile and wave to Mildred. Then one day, Robbie suddenly stopped coming for his lessons. Mildred considered calling to inquire, but thought that both mother and son had changed their minds because of his lack of talent and progress. Secretly, Mildred admits she was glad that Robbie had changed his mind, because he would have been a bad advertisement for her as a teacher. Several weeks later, she mailed a flyer to the students' homes. It announced a recital that her students were due to present. To her surprise, Robbie, who had obviously received one such flyer, asked if he could come and be part of the recital. Mildred explained that the recital was by current pupils and that he didn't qualify because he had dropped out. Robbie explained that his mother had been ill and unable to take him to his piano lessons, but that he had been practicing. "Please, Miss Honor, I've got to play," the eager young student insisted. For a moment, Mildred was torn in two directions. Should she or should she not? However, as Robbie was so insistent, she was moved to compassion and felt that it would be all right, and so she consented. The night of the recital did come around, and the high school gymnasium was packed with parents, relatives, and friends. Mildred discreetly placed Robbie last in the program, just before she would come up to thank all the students and play the final piece. With that curtain closed, she hoped to salvage whatever damage Robbie's performance would have caused. Every student performed admirably. They had all rehearsed the piece they had decided to play to perfection. Then came Robbie. He wasn't even appropriately dressed. His shirt was crumpled and his hair was disheveled. Mildred was visibly upset and wondered, why wasn't he dressed up like the other students? And why didn't his mother at least make him comb his hair for this special night? Robbie pulled out the piano bench and, to the surprise of all present, he announced that he had chosen to play Mozart's Concerto No. 21 in C major. Placing his fingers on the ivory keys, Robbie began, and Mildred concedes that she was not prepared for what was to follow. Never before had she heard Mozart played so well by anyone his age. His fingers were light on the keys, even dancing nimbly on the ivories. Robbie went from pianissimo to fortissimo, from allegro to virtuoso, with the dexterity of a seasoned pianist. And his suspended chords, which Mozart demands, were magnificent. After 6.5 minutes, he ended with a grand crescendo, and everyone in the audience was on their feet, clapping enthusiastically and cheering wildly. Overcome with emotion, Mildred rushed onto the stage and wrapped her arms around the beaming young student, joyfully savoring every moment of that spontaneous, heart-warming adulation. She walked up to the microphone and said, "I've never heard you play like that, Robbie. How did you do it?" And this was his candid response. "Well, Miss Honor, remember I told you that my mom was ill? Actually, she had cancer and passed away this morning. And well, she was born deaf, so tonight was the first time she had ever heard me play. And I wanted to make it special, very special," said Mildred. There wasn't a dry eye in the audience that evening. As the people from social services led Robbie from the stage to be placed in foster care, I noticed that even their eyes were red and puffy. I thought to myself then how much richer my life had been for taking Robbie in as my pupil. No, I have never had a prodigy, but that night I became a prodigy of Robbie. He was the teacher and I was the pupil, for he had taught me the meaning of perseverance, love, and believing in yourself, and maybe even taking a chance on someone, even when you didn't know why. Most regretfully, Robbie was killed years later in the senseless and devastating bombing of the Alfred P. Murrah Federal Building in Oklahoma City in April 1995. Indeed, every individual can make a difference, as Robbie did. If God didn't have a purpose for us, we wouldn't be here. What the caterpillar calls the end of the road, God calls a butterfly.